As tensions between the United States and China escalate, the geopolitical landscape is shifting dramatically.
Recently, President Donald Trump intensified his trade war with China by imposing a new 10% tariff on a range of Chinese imports, prompting a swift and defiant response from Beijing. Chinese officials asserting their resolve declared China will fight to the bitter end of any trade war, setting the stage for a potential escalation of hostilities that could have significant repercussions for both nations and the global economy. In a calculated move, China has retaliated with its own tariffs on U.S. agricultural products, which directly target the farming communities that largely supported Trump in the 2024 elections. The timing of these tariffs is particularly strategic, coming just as the U.S. imposes its latest round of levies, which adds to a series of punitive measures from Trump's previous term. Farmers in the U.S. are now facing tariffs ranging from 10 to 15% on key exports like soybeans, chicken, beef, and pork, commodities that represent a substantial portion of their market.
Analysts predict that the latest developments could lead to a significant downturn in U.S. agricultural markets. The tariffs are broadly negative for U.S. agricultural markets.
It is going to have a bearish influence on prices, noted Ol Howe of Icon Commodities. With approximately 30% of U.S. soybeans headed to China, the stakes are high for American farmers, who are increasingly vulnerable to the consequences of this trade conflict.
However, while the rhetoric from Beijing is aggressive,
there are indications that China may also be seeking a pathway to negotiations.
China's foreign ministry spokesperson urged the U.S. to abandon its bullying stance and return to dialogue, emphasizing that both countries could benefit from cooperation rather than confrontation.
This nuanced approach suggests that while China is prepared to retaliate, it is also open to discussion, a sentiment echoed by analysts who note that the Chinese tariffs remain below the levels seen during the last trade war in 2018.
The geopolitical implications extend beyond trade alone. Former U.S. Ambassador Winston Lord expressed concern that Trump's foreign policy is leading to a diminished U.S. role on the global stage. He remarked that current trends could empower nations like China and North Korea, creating a new world order where the U.S. has less influence. If this continues, China and North Korea are delighted at what's going on, he warned, highlighting the potential risks for American interests abroad.
As countries globally reassess their relationships with the U.S., the ramifications of Trump's tariffs and foreign policy could lead to a realignment of alliances.
European leaders observing the alienation of traditional allies are watching closely as they consider how to respond to an America that appears increasingly unilateral in its approach.
The ramifications of these shifts could be felt throughout Asia as well, where nations are grappling with the uncertainty of U.S. commitments to defense and economic partnerships. The ongoing trade war not only threatens to disrupt economic stability but could also ignite broader tensions that extend into military and diplomatic arenas. As both nations posture for advantage, the potential for an all-out trade war looms large, with each side weighing the costs and benefits of escalation versus negotiation.
Looking ahead, the situation remains fluid. The prospect of negotiations between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping has been mentioned but remains unconfirmed, raising questions about whether diplomatic avenues can be pursued amid mounting economic hostilities.
As both nations prepare for what could be a protracted battle, the world watches closely, aware that the outcomes will shape the global economic landscape for years to come. As the geopolitical landscape shifts and trade tensions escalate, China finds itself at a critical juncture, grappling with a multitude of economic challenges while preparing for its annual political meetings in Beijing. The backdrop of these discussions is marked by the looming threat of increased tariffs from the United States, a move that could significantly impact China's already strained economy. With former President Donald Trump rekindling trade hostilities, China's leadership is emphasizing resilience and unity as it navigates these turbulent waters. This week, the Two Sessions, a significant political event in China, commenced, gathering thousands of lawmakers, business leaders, and academics in the capital. The Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference (CPPCC) met on Tuesday, followed by the National People's Congress (NPC), which will outline the government's policy agenda for 2025. Premier Li Qiang is set to deliver a much-anticipated government work report that will detail the economic growth targets and policies designed to counteract the hurdles faced by the nation. China's economy is grappling with sluggish growth, low consumer confidence, and a crisis in the property sector, all exacerbated by the threat of a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports,
set to take effect imminently. Analysts suggest that this year's NPC will serve as a platform for the leadership to showcase political cohesion and reaffirm that China remains on a path toward greatness under President Xi Jinping's guidance. Strong leadership from the Chinese Communist Party and strengthening China's economic and technological resilience against external shocks are more necessary than ever, remarked Nis Grunberg, a scholar at the Mercator Institute for China Studies. President Xi has characterized the economic challenges as complex and multifaceted, emphasizing the need for a balanced relationship between market forces and government intervention. The government's growth target for 2025 is expected to be around 5%, a figure seen as both realistic and a reflection of ongoing economic headwinds. This target aims to project stability and continuity amid uncertainty, with experts indicating that the government will likely implement measures to stimulate domestic demand and consumption. In light of the impending tariffs, Lizzie Li of the Asia Society Policy Institute believes that the Chinese government will intensify efforts to revitalize consumer spending. We are likely to see stronger policy efforts beyond just trade-in subsidies for cars and home appliances, she noted, highlighting the potential for increased investment in sectors such as live stream commerce and initiatives targeting the elderly population. Furthermore, there may be a rise in fiscal deficits and state-backed investment funds to support key industries and local economies. The Chinese government is not only focused on domestic consumption but also on enhancing its high-tech manufacturing capabilities. During a recent symposium, President Xi called for the healthy development of the private sector, urging the removal of barriers to competition. This is a notable shift from previous years where significant crackdowns on tech giants like Alibaba and Tencent raised concerns about government overreach. Analysts suggest that state support for private sector innovation, particularly in artificial intelligence and semiconductors, will become increasingly vital as tensions with the U.S. escalate. On the foreign policy front, the international community is closely monitoring China's response to the U.S. tariffs. The Global Times reported that the Chinese government is considering countermeasures, including potential tariffs on U.S. agricultural products. Political scientist Wen Ti-sung noted that as the U.S. alters its approach, China aims to reframe itself as a stabilizing force in the global arena, contrasting with its previous image as a revisionist power. As these political meetings unfold, the implications for both China and the global economy are profound. The outcomes of the two sessions will not only shape China's economic policies but also signal its strategic posture in the face of renewed trade tensions with the U.S. Observers will be keenly watching how China balances internal needs with external pressures, striving to maintain stability and growth in an increasingly unpredictable environment. As the world awaits the final decisions from Beijing, the stakes have never been higher for both nations and their economic futures. As China gears up for its annual political meetings, a wave of economic concerns and the growing influence of artificial intelligence (AI) are set to dominate discussions. The National People's Congress (NPC) will convene this week in Beijing, with nearly 2,900 delegates arriving to outline the government's priorities for 2025. This year's session coincides with a challenging economic landscape, characterized by sluggish domestic consumption, a protracted property crisis, and an escalating trade conflict with the United States. The NPC is often viewed as a ceremonial gathering, yet it serves as a critical platform for the Chinese government to communicate its strategic direction. Premier Li Qiang is anticipated to announce an economic growth target of approximately 5%, maintaining consistency with previous years. This figure reflects a cautious acknowledgement of ongoing economic headwinds and aims to project stability amidst uncertainty. Li Qiang, spokesman for the NPC, highlighted the multifaceted challenges facing China's economy.
Undoubtedly, the adverse impacts brought by the external environment have deepened, and China's economy still faces some difficulties and challenges, he stated. The external pressures are exacerbated by new tariffs imposed by the U.S., which include a 15% tax on various agricultural imports from China. This retaliatory measure follows a significant increase in U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods, signaling a potential escalation in trade tensions. Analysts expect the government to unveil measures designed to stimulate domestic demand as a buffer against these external shocks. Suggestions include raising the fiscal deficit from 3% to 4% to fund consumption-boosting initiatives. However, expectations for grand stimulus packages are tempered, as the focus may shift toward targeted support rather than broad-based fiscal expansion.
In tandem with economic discussions, the role of AI in China's future is set to take center stage.
Liu pointed to the recent launch of the DeepSeek AI model as emblematic of China's commitment to leveraging technology for inclusive development. The government's approach underscores a strategic pivot toward enhancing technological self-reliance while fostering innovation within the private sector. Chinese President Xi Jinping has underscored the importance of engaging with business leaders to ensure the private sector can contribute to national goals. During a recent meeting with influential figures such as Alibaba's Jack Ma and Huawei's Ren Zhengfei, Xi emphasized the necessity of harnessing private enterprise to drive growth and innovation. Xi realizes he needs the private sector to keep his underlying priorities chugging along, noted Neil Thomas,
a fellow on Chinese politics at the Asia Society Policy Institute.
The NPC will also address legislative measures aimed at improving market conditions for private enterprises, reflecting a broader governmental effort to foster a supportive environment for business amidst economic turbulence. This initiative is further complicated by the backdrop of heightened U.S.-China tensions as China prepares to respond to the latest U.S. tariffs, potentially through countermeasures targeting American agricultural exports. As the two sessions unfold, all eyes will be on how the Chinese leadership balances immediate economic needs with long-term strategic goals, including AI development and market reforms.
The convergence of these issues could redefine China's trajectory in the coming years, especially as it seeks to assert itself amidst global economic pressures.
The outcomes of this week's meetings will not only shape the domestic landscape but also signal China's strategic posture on the world stage as it grapples with evolving geopolitical dynamics. Looking ahead, the interplay between economic policy, technological advancement, and international relations will be crucial in determining China's path forward amidst an increasingly complex global environment. In a significant escalation of trade tensions, China has announced the imposition of additional tariffs of up to 15% on key U.S. agricultural imports, including chicken, pork, soybeans,
and beef. This move comes in retaliation to recent tariff increases ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump, who raised tariffs on Chinese goods to 20%. The new tariffs, which will take effect on March 10,
are part of a broader strategy by the Chinese government to counteract perceived threats to its economic interests and mark another chapter in the ongoing trade war between the two nations.
The announcement from China's Ministry of Commerce underscores a growing sense of urgency within Beijing to protect its domestic markets.
The additional tariff on U.S. chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton will stand at 15%, while other products like sorghum, soybeans, pork, and seafood will see a 10% increase.
This decision reflects China's shifting trade dynamics as it continues to diversify its sources for agricultural imports, increasingly relying on suppliers from Brazil and Argentina. Notably, this escalation is not limited to tariffs alone. On the same day, China placed 10 more U.S. firms on its unreliable entity list, which restricts these companies from participating in trade or investment activities related to China. This list now includes various firms across sectors such as aerospace and defense, highlighting the depth of the trade rift and the growing regulatory scrutiny faced by U.S. businesses operating within China. The implications of these newly imposed tariffs are extensive, particularly for American farmers who have historically relied on China as a crucial market for their exports.
In fiscal year 2023, U.S. agricultural exports to China totaled approximately $33.8 billion, down from $36.4 billion in the previous year, indicating a potential downturn in bilateral trade relations amid increasing tariffs. As the U.S. has curbed imports from China, the latter has sought to bolster its agricultural imports from alternative sources, thereby reducing its dependency on American products.
In a parallel development,
Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that China had established a live-fire exercise zone in international waters near its shores, further heightening regional tensions.
The Taiwanese government condemned these actions as a blatant violation of international norms and a provocation to regional stability.
The creation of this military zone coincides with a surge in Chinese military activities near Taiwan, including the deployment of aircraft and naval forces, prompting the U.S. to express its concern and reiterate its commitment to monitoring these developments closely.
As both nations navigate this tumultuous landscape, the future of U.S.-China trade relations remains uncertain.
Analysts suggest that the ongoing tit-for-tat may lead to further disruptions in global supply chains, impacting not only agricultural sectors but also technology and manufacturing industries. The escalation of tariffs and trade restrictions signals a deepening schism that could have long-lasting effects on international trade dynamics. In conclusion, the landscape of U.S.-China relations continues to evolve, rapidly influenced by tariffs, military posturing, and a complex interplay of economic interests. As both countries brace for the consequences of their actions, the global community watches closely, anticipating how these developments will shape future interactions and the broader geopolitical climate. As the world grapples with shifting power dynamics and geopolitical tensions, the interplay between the United States and China continues to evolve dramatically. The latest developments surrounding U.S. foreign policy, particularly under President Donald Trump, suggest a unique opportunity for China to assert its influence on the global stage, with the U.S. stepping back from its traditional roles and alliances. Beijing is poised to capitalize on this opening, particularly as it takes on the presidency of the United Nations Security Council for the month. Recent commentary highlights the growing concern among U.S. lawmakers regarding China's expanding reach. Donald Trump Jr., in a notable statement, cautioned against poking the dragon, urging a nuanced approach in U.S.-China relations. His remarks underscore the complexities of navigating foreign policy in a climate where perceptions of China are increasingly negative. A Pew survey conducted last year revealed that 81% of Americans viewed China unfavorably, reflecting a significant shift from previous years when bilateral relations appeared more amicable. The backdrop of this evolving relationship is marked by a series of aggressive tariffs and trade restrictions initiated by the Trump administration aimed at curtailing China's economic ascendancy. As the U.S. grapples with its internal challenges and foreign policy missteps, including a recent diplomatic clash between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, China is looking to exploit these fissures. Andrew Small, a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund, suggested that the current U.S. approach could create unprecedented opportunities for Beijing, particularly in the context of Taiwan and its relations with Europe. The recent visit by all 13 Canadian premiers to Washington, aimed at reinforcing ties with the U.S. amid fears of a tariff war, also highlights the delicate balancing act nations are performing in response to U.S. policy shifts. Ontario Premier Doug Ford's emphasis on the need for a united front against China illustrates the heightened awareness of China as a strategic competitor, not just for the U.S. but for its allies as well.
Moreover, the implications of these tensions extend beyond trade and diplomacy. China's ongoing efforts to position itself as a peacemaker in the Ukraine crisis reflect its broader ambition to reshape international perceptions and alliances. Despite its professed neutrality, Beijing has supported Russia's interests while simultaneously seeking to engage with European leaders who may feel abandoned by an erratic U.S. policy. This diplomatic balancing act aims to create a narrative where China can be seen as a stabilizing force amid Western disarray. As the U.S. military aid to Ukraine becomes more uncertain, concerns regarding Taiwan's security have also intensified. The Taiwanese government is closely monitoring U.S. support for Ukraine as a potential indicator of how Washington might respond to a crisis in the Taiwan Strait.
Trump's recent statements advocating for increased defense spending in Taiwan further complicate this scenario, as they signal an expectation for Taiwan to bolster its own defenses while also relying on U.S. support. The unfolding geopolitical landscape raises critical questions regarding the future of U.S.-China relations. While Trump's return to the White House might signal a continuation of tough policies, the administration's unpredictable nature could yield unexpected outcomes. The Chinese leadership, despite initial hopes for a softer approach under Biden, appears resigned to a prolonged period of tension and competition. In conclusion, as the dynamics of international relations shift, the actions and attitudes of both the U.S. and China will undoubtedly shape the future landscape of global politics. With China seizing the moment to enhance its standing on the world stage, observers will be watching closely to see how these developments unfold and what they mean for international cooperation, trade, and security in the years to come.
The interplay between rivalry and opportunity continues to define the narrative, suggesting that the next chapter in U.S.-China relations is far from written.